Thank you. Okay. All right. So once again, thank everybody for being here. Um, and what I'm trying to do is just get my screen set up so we can continue on with this. Can you see this text that I put up? Share the
Yeah,
Bardo
I can
Thodol.
see it.
All right, good. So the intention is here to be able to share the Bardo Thodol. So you can raise any of your questions or comments anytime. I don't mind at all, but if you write them down and we talk, I'm going to leave time at the end of the session, like around 8:30 or so, for any comments and questions by everybody. So, but if there's something that comes up in your mind that you think that we should talk about as we're having our discussion, I'll be more than glad to stop what I'm doing and talk about it. So, um, the the whole thing about the Bardo Thodol is that it is symbolic. It is a symbolic of the mandalas, of the peaceful deities and the wrathful deities. We're going to talk about what they are. We're going to, in the weeks to come and so on, we're going to be more specific about this. But from those mandalas of the deities, of these meditational deities, comes this display from their three doors of the three jewels of the body, speech, and mind, of the Sangha, the Dharma, and the Buddha.
Thank you.
So so all of this is being able to recognize the symbology and be able to apply it to our own lives. So the absolute, we talk about the absolute, we talk about the relative. And it's the absolute that radiates the relative. So we see this phenomenal nature because out of the compassion of the absolute. So the Bardo Thodol is a Sambhogagaya display of these deities. They're called the Shicho deities, 100 deities. And through the practice of the Bardo Thodol, they are listed, enumerated, and given, their characteristics, activities, and so on. And it's up to us to be able to learn to recognize them within ourselves, that these are features of ourselves. So it's like a seminal point from this absolute, this seminal point, this beginning point that bursts through, if you will, to all levels of consciousness, to all levels of consciousness. So the word level is a palindrome. It's like a mirror of itself. And we begin to realize that everything that we are, everything that we see, all this phenomenal nature is like, are all these different levels or all these different mirrors. We see ourselves in all these different things, and all these different things, we see each other. We see all this. So this palindrome, just as an understanding, there's about 3,000 English examples of palindromes. So there's words like radar, noon, deed, tenet, civic, deified, mom. All these are very interesting words and have a universal meaning to them, where they have a way of being able to demonstrate that they are levels of being able to, like a mirror, to be able to radiate out and then to, as a mirror, come back like echoes. The radar is like echoes. The noontime is the zenith of the sun in the sky. A deed is the activities that we are doing and so on. The tenets are any opinion, principle, or doctrine or dogma that has to do with any kind of organized intelligence that we use for our own lives and so on. And civic has to do with, being able to have an organization, government, that kind of thing. Civilization. Deified, being able to see that all this has a sacred holiness to it. Deified, and this mirror aspect of it. And of course, mom, as the mother of all this wisdom, that we all spring forth from this wisdom. So, and the compassion that is the other side of this wisdom. So it's just an interesting thing to be able to look at all the levels of consciousness as a palindrome and see how dynamic this is. So another feature about this would be in the quantum, because in the phenomenal, we're learning, in the physics, we're learning the smallest quantity of radiant energy is this quantum. And every time we see something quantum, every experiment that is done by the scientists and so on, they find that there is this duplicity. That not only, they're looking for one thing, but they find that there's a mirror of whatever it is that they are looking for. So this is something that is, characteristic of the phenomenal nature and so on. And from the absolute, we say that there is this oneness, this feature that everything comes from. So through the body, speech, and mind, the body being this physical aspect, this physics, the speech being the psychology, being the science of behavior, and I didn't spell that correctly, and the ordinary little mind, the science of thoughts, mental states, and processes. So this is the body, speech, and mind of our phenomenal nature. But then there is the extraordinary big mind, the extraordinary spirit mind or the heart mind, which is seemingly invisible, but actually it's all connected to body, speech, and mind, like an eight matrix. It's all interconnected with each other. So it's through the Bardo Thodol that we're able to visualize this. The Bardo Thodol is a guide to be able to help us do this. So it is symbolic of what is the dynamic of what is happening in this phenomenal nature that leads us to the absolute, to that liberation of all this duality, all these myriad dynamics that bind us up, that hold us together, and so on. So this Bardo Thodol is the symbology of energy in the physical, intellectual, and spiritual. It is the symbology of energy, because we look at, what is a deity, and there's many different definitions, but in the Buddhist tradition, we look at a deity as the personification of energy. So it is something that we develop with our mind in order that we can understand, that we can communicate, we can think about what it is, because what it is altogether is non-conceptual. So we have the conceptual in the phenomenal nature for us to be able to explore this. So the goal of the Bardo Thodol is liberation from this ordinary delusion, attachment, and hatred of the body, speech, and mind to the freedom of energy. And this freedom of energy can be talked about as space, can be talked about as non-conceptual, can be talked about as non-objectifiable, and unelaborated. So this freedom of energy is what we're trying to get to. It's another way of saying enlightenment. Enlightenment, we've talked about before, is kind of nebulous. But to say that there is this freedom, it's something that maybe we can all understand, this freedom, and with this freedom comes this awareness, comes this awakeness, the awakened one, the Buddha. So this is what we're trying to do, and the Bardo Thodol is a means to help us to be able to recognize that. It's a tool. In the Dharma vocabulary, the educated liberated mind is in the Lam Rim texts, such as the Jewel Ornamental Liberation. So the Lam Rim texts are stages of the path, and all the different traditions, the Kagyu, the Nyingma, the Galupa, the Shakya, the Bun, all have their Lam Rim texts, their stages of the path texts, which are a cornerstone to their teachings and understanding and so on. So the Jewel Ornamental Liberation is the one that in the Kagyu, which is the tradition that I came into and so on like that. And we've studied, many, many times and so on, and we apply it all the time. So through the Lam Rim text, we learn the vocabulary. We're educating our liberated minds. Also is the Mahamudra, the great seal of inner freedom. The great seal of inner freedom is what the Mahamudra. So the Mahamudra is typified in the Kagyu tradition and the Kagyu tradition, excuse me, and also is the Dzogchen, which is the great perfection, the purity of freedom, the purity of freedom. So this is typified in the Nyingma tradition. And the Galupa kind of goes between these, it accepts and looks at both of these, the Mahamudra teachings and the Dzogchen teachings. The Bun I'm not as familiar with, so I can't speak to that. And the same with the Shakya. I can't speak to that. But nevertheless, these great texts are speaking now about the deeper philosophic and uh, the liberation techniques. It's through the Bardo Thodol that we're able to visualize the way in which those techniques take place. We're able to discover and we're able to see the changes through the Lam Rim text. The Mahamudra and the Dzogchen keeps taking us level, up, and it gets more and more abstract. It gets more and more diverse in terms of what it is. It's going from something that seems to be concrete into something that is non-existent. So, so these three levels of text are the education of the liberated mind. And that's what we're trying to do, is to take our mind as it is now and be able to liberate it through this education process, through this crossing over, through this cutting through all the things that are in the phenomenal nature and the intelligence and so on. So each are a methodical liberation path from the suffering of the duplicitous nature of phenomena through the union and the emergence of all levels of thought and activity. So all these things that we see, all these things that we think of and so on, all become tools for us. But at some point, we no longer need the tools. And this is what we're working to get toward. But but at this point, we need to embrace the tools. We need to engage the tools and continue to use them and bring them to life within our own embodiment, and be able to lead us to becoming awakened, to realize our awakened nature, accomplished in the realization. So this is accomplished in the realization of the spontaneous presence of the absolute as the actualized body, speech, and mind. So this is from the Dzogchen point of view. And we talk about this many times in the Bardo Thodol, this spontaneous presence, this awakening of clarity, of of being present. So these words that I've capitalized here are for you to be able to learn to recognize these things as they come up through the teachings, as we come up through our discussions and so on. That these words, these vocabulary words in English, you know, are very important in the way in which we're using these texts and so on. Um, so if you want to print this, I put this in the chat so you can save it. You can print it if you like, and it'll be helpful in your being able to analyze and see what the Bardo Thodol is. So the Bardo Thodol is the exposition of the phenomenal intelligence of the process of releasing the spiritual energy that is bound by the afflictive emotions, the wrong views of mental misconceptions, and the residual habitual tendencies. So the Bardo Thodol is the exposition. It is the presentation. It is the symbolic, you know, anthropomorphication, if you will, of phenomenal intelligence, all this stuff that we are able to conjure together to be able to try and understand our spirituality, which is this process of releasing this spiritual energy. And then the spiritual energy is non-conceptual, is unelaborated, and so on. It's non-objectifiable and so on. It's bound up by the afflictive emotions. There's three things that bind us up. There's the afflictive emotions. These are the obscurations, the three obscurations. The afflictive emotions that we've talked about so many times as being ignorance, hatred, attachment, jealousy, and greed. So these are the common five afflictive emotions, but there's all these myriad combinations of them that make up the 84,000 emotions that we're taught that the Buddha, met with people over his time as being a teacher and so on, and that he was able to help people to break through, cut through those afflictive emotions and so on. So the wrong view of mental misconceptions is our human nature to think that we can know and that we can help all other beings and that we need to do this and so on. And this is the obscuration of wisdom. This is the obscuration of thinking that through our ordinariness, we can help all beings and so on. To a degree, that's what we do. But at some point, we have to let that go. And in letting that go is when we're able to reach the point of crossing over. So we have to cut through all those mental misconceptions and allow ourselves to cross over from that obscuration of the wrong views of mental misconceptions. And the third one is the residual habitual tendencies. That while we are on the path as bodhisattva, we're on the path and we're going through all these stages of purification and so on, we may be able to accomplish a great deal of awareness and understanding and so on, but there's still these residual habitual tendencies that we can fall prey to. And so we need to be ever vigilant to be able to recognize these habitual tendencies and so on. And through the Bardo Thodol, there are meditational deities, there are beings within ourselves to help us to do that. So learning how the peaceful deities work, how the wrathful, fierce deities work, and how these enlightened beings that are not as well known. They're not as talked about until you get into the Bardo Thodol. So we're going to see how that works, how these enlightened beings help us to overcome our habitual tendencies. So the application of the Bardo Thodol is the guide through the discoveries and the changes of the realizations of life, death, and rebirth of a temporary entity. We being that temporary entity. We are temporary. We have this 60, 80, 90, 100 years, whatever it is, to live in this life and so on. And we're going through constant death and rebirth. We may not view it that way, but this is what we're doing because um, uh, every time we're changing. Are we the same person that we were 20 years ago? Are we the same person that we were a year ago? Are we the same person that we were 2 hours ago? And will we be the same person in 2 hours after this? Will we be changed? Will there be new things that we will have brought into our consciousness that then forever change us in our lifetime and so on? So we're saying these realizations of life, death, and rebirth. There also, of course, is the very literal death of dropping our body. And then the rebirth or the reincarnation of that energy that we eject when we die, when we leave our body, that spiritual energy that is released. How is it released and where does it go? And how does it come back? How does it reincarnate and so on? So this is all part of the Bardo Thodol. So we can look at it in terms of this physical death, this physical rebirth and everything, but there also is this spiritual element, this meditational element that really this is the inner meaning of the Bardo Thodol, that we're going through this birth, death, recycle all the time. And being able to recognize and seize those opportunities is what the Bardo Thodol is helping us to do. Then the Mahamudra and the Dzogchen teachings mean a whole lot more because then we can see how this is manifesting. So it's either in the sense of the three times of existent phenomenal nature, this ordinariness, the three times, the past, present, and future that we are involved in all the time. We're always looking at what was past, what we're doing now, where we want to go, and so on. And this is part of what it is to be in this existence, in this phenomenal nature. Or that we can, in the no sense, here was the sense of the three times. Here is the no sense because we have transcended these sensations. We have transcended these perceptions and so on of time and place of the awakened, omniscient, spiritual nature that is the absolute and permeates the phenomenal. So this absolute is not somewhere out there. It's right within ourselves. We are part of the absolute. We are absolute. And we choose to see ourselves as relative and phenomena. And what we need to do is to be able to control our mind. It's our mind that is thinking that it needs this phenomenal nature, that it excels, it exalts itself through the ego and so on in this phenomenal nature. But to be able to control the mind, which is trying to do this, which has the ego, and be able to control it, to rest that, and to allow us to recognize the permutation or the absolute that we are also part of. The absolute is just swamped by the phenomena. So when we control the phenomena, the absolute just shines right through. So We say in the no sense of time and place of the awakened, omniscient spiritual nature that is the absolute and permeates the phenomenal. We don't have to go anywhere else. It's right here now, wherever you are. The threefold activity of accumulating knowledge is the listening, the study, is the contemplating, the thinking, and the meditating, where we can cut through when we exhaust the listening, the study, we exhaust the contemplation, the mental process of thinking about all this stuff. When we exhaust that and we rest, and then we enter into that which is referred to as no thought, is where there is this meditation, this realization, this recognition of that absolute nature within ourselves and so on. Then we bring it with us. It stays with us. It's not something we leave behind. There is this post meditation where we get up off the cushion, so to speak, and we take this meditation with us wherever we go. And we begin to recognize and see this absolute nature in all things. This all becomes Buddha nature, what we refer to as Buddha nature, as a result of that, and so on. So now we're seeing the permeation of the absolute in all things, and even in this display of the phenomenal nature. So the threefold activity of accumulating knowledge, listening, contemplating, and meditating. So these are the keys. These listening, contemplating, meditating, the threefold activity of accumulating knowledge are the keys to cut through all this ordinariness and to cross over the threshold of the human mind to liberation from suffering of that mind. So this is entering into what we call Buddha. Other traditions might call it God. They might call it Christ. They might call it Yahweh. They might call it Krishna, Brahma, whatever. All these different traditions speak of this same kind of crossing over, the same way in which this is done. The Buddhism is very, very, very articulate in being able to do this, in my experience at least, more than anything else that I've seen. So this is why I continue to study and talk about Buddhism, because of its articulation and being able to do this. But what we're doing is crossing over the threshold of our human mind into that absolute mind, into that heart mind. And then abiding in that, letting that become our priority, rather than allowing ourselves to slip back into the ordinariness, which we do over and over again, especially in the beginning and everything. It's unstable. That crossing over is unstable. But through the dedication, through the devotion to the practice and to the study and so on, it becomes more and more and more and more stable and so on. So the Bardo Thodol is a tool to be able to help us to stabilize that, because it gives us a system of mnemonics, if you will, signposts that relate to that which is beyond our ordinary being able to way to articulate this. So the Bardo Thodol is that guide through the paths of the Mahamudra, inner freedom, and Dzogchen, purity of freedom. So the Bardo Thodol is a tool for the Mahamudra and for the Dzogchen. The Mahamudra and the Dzogchen are very, very abstract. And to help us to be able to understand, have the embodiment of that, we use the Bardo Thodol to be able to help do that. But we see it as symbolic. It is not real in the sense that we think of, that were these things actually, do they really are born? Are they physical or something? They're meditational. They're not necessarily physical. They're physical only in the sense of our embodiment of those things. So the great liberation by hearing in the intermediate state. So what the Bardo Thodol translates to in English is the great liberation by hearing in the intermediate states. So the intermediate states are the Bardo states, the six Bardos, and we've talked about them before. We're going to talk about them tonight, you know. So these intermediate states that we can begin to recognize how we are moving through those states simultaneously all the time through spontaneous presence. And this great liberation by hearing, remember that what this was, or how it's been used as a guide for someone who has actually physically died, a guide for them to go through the death process, and then to be born in the or to become in the bardo of what we call reality, into that bardo, and can they remain in that reality, or do they slip back into their ordinariness and become born again as a human being, or have some other physical kind of a body or something like that. So this is the outer meaning of the Bardo Thodol, this great liberation by hearing. But the inner is through the meditation process, is that we're doing this so that when we do physically die, that we already are in that absolute state. And we don't even need to recognize that we lost our body, that our body has stopped working. We won't even notice, because that's how strong, that's how stable we've become in that spirituality. So, as incredible as that sounds, this is what we do. So anyway, if you want to print this, it's in the chat, and you can download it. And if you want me to send you a copy, I can do that too. I'm going to be sending out some more things as time goes on to help understand what's going on here. Does anybody right now have any comments or questions about anything that I just spoke about?
Pema Dorje.
Yes, sir.
I
Oh,
got
you
my
got the
book.
book.
I just got it today.
Excellent. All
Yep.
right, very good.
I didn't see that this is in the chat, so maybe just
Oh,
email it.
that's not in the chat.
No, not the book. The you what you just went through.
The share the Bardo is in the chat, isn't it?
Well, maybe I came in late, so I didn't get the share. If I come in after, if I
No, because I just did it.
I don't see it in the chat either. You mean the Zoom chat?
Yeah, the Zoom chat.
Yeah, I don't see it in there either.
Well, wait a minute. Let me close this.
it'd be easier for me if you just emailed it,
All right, I can do that.
because
But
it's
let me
hard.
see here. Oh, the chat went away.
Hmm.
Maybe when
Went in and went out, maybe.
maybe
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Yeah.
or maybe I didn't hit that button there. That's what it was. Sorry about that. All right, now you should see it.
Okay.
All right, so I hope that was helpful in some degree. Okay, so there's no questions or comments for now. So if, like I said, at the end, I really want everybody to have a discussion. So if you have comments that you want to make, jot them down so you don't forget. Okay, so now we're going to come to a part of the Bardo Thodol. And the Bardo Thodol, just a little history, and that is that this was composed by Padmasambhava Guru Rinpoche back in the 8th century. And it was transcribed by his consort Sogol Yeshe Sogol, and he ordered her to bury the text. It became what's called a terma text, where it was buried, and that it would be discovered at some time when there are those who are ready to be able to receive the teachings of this. So it wasn't until the 14th century or so when Karma Lingpa was able to discover this. So the question has come up, was there an actual text, or was it a meditational discovery, something that Karma Lingpa and his subsequent family was able to take in and be able to write down. Maybe they wrote it down. It's not clear, So it's but the veracity of what is included in the Bardo Thodol stands for itself. So whichever way it came is secondary to the importance of what the message is. Yes, Kunga.
Um, are you familiar with the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by
Yes,
Sogye Rinpoche?
yes.
How would you relate these two texts?
Well, it's his interpretation of the Bardo Thodol, and it's he does a very good job in terms of how to apply glimpse after glimpse of what this is, but it's not a literal translation of the Bardo Thodol. So it's a very good study guide. It's a very good introduction, but it's not very in depth. That's how I would call it. This is the book that is the translation that text that you have, Kunga, comes from. This is by Gourmet Dorje, who passed in the past year or two, and who was a great scholar himself and so on. And he was born and raised in Scotland, but went to Tibet and returned to Scotland and started a school there and so on like that. And he also is the translator of the Dujum Rinpoche book, this book here, which is the Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism. So this was given as a transmission by Dujum Rinpoche, who's respected by everybody, and so it was Gourmet Dorje who translated that into this. So this is a great book to have as well.
Is Sogye Rinpoche in the same lineage as I'm not
He's
sure what
Nyingma.
lineage.
He's Nyingma.
Okay.
He was Nyingma, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so a lot of these things you can look up. If you get that book that I just held up, this book here, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Oh, and I should say that the title, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, was something that was co-opted by the first English translator of the Bardo Thodol back in 1923. And he was an English scholar of sorts or whatever who went to Tibet, and he found the Tibetan Book of the Dead as being used, the Bardo Thodol as being used in these rites of passage for those who were dying and so on like that. And he saw the import of it and he translated it. And he translated the title, Bardo Thodol, as the Tibetan Book of the Dead because at that time in England, in the 19th century, 18th century, 20th century, the Egyptian Book of the Dead was very, very, very popular. And so he co-opted that title, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, to become the Tibetan Book of the Dead in this case. So back in the day when the pharaohs and so on were living in their way and so on, that they were following the instructions of the Egyptian Book of the Dead to literally prepare themselves for death and so on. So he saw this as a parallel. So that's why the name, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, has become popularized. But the real translation of the name Bardo Thodol is the great liberation by hearing in the intermediate states. If you take apart the words Bardo Thodol, that's what it would be translated as in English. Okay, so the thing I'd like to show you now is this here is um, the table of contents of the book. So here we see that there's daily prayers and recitations before death. And then here are root verses. We're going to recite a couple of these prayers today. And then we're going to engage in the daily main practice of the Bardo Thodol in the weeks to come. And then if we have time, we're going to get more detailed into each of these parts. So first come these prayers to set up our motivation, to set up our remembrances of what it is that we are doing, and so on. So now part one of the Bardo Thodol is the elucidation of the intermediate state of the time of death and the appearances of the peaceful deities in the intermediate state of reality. So this goes through that the Bardo Thodol, for someone who has passed or is passing and is about to pass, these prayers, these practices continue for 49 days. So it's broken down for day one, day two, day three, and so on like that. Um, in a very orthodox manner, if it's someone who is important to the family who's passed, or to a lama, so, and someone who has a strong following or a strong support of the monastics and everything, they will recite this whole book every day for 49 days. It takes me 4.5 hours to recite the whole book at a very brisk speed. You know, you can hear every single word. You know, I'm not obliterating anything, but and I've done it many times for family members and friends, people I know, and so on like that. But nevertheless, for our study purposes and for our practice purposes, we can break it down into these days to be able to say, okay, on this day, number one, day number two, three, four, whatever, is focusing on a particular deity or set of deities for a particular movement, if you will, through the 49 days, through the levels of the liberation, the way in which it works. So part one is the elucidation of the peaceful deities. So the peaceful deities reside in the heart center. And the heart center is blocked up by the emotions. The emotions come down from the mental aspect, from the intellectual aspect. If you can clear that, then the um, then the peaceful deities have no obstruction, or very little obstruction. So that's what we're trying to recognize how this works. We're trying to open up the heart center, which is being blocked up by these obscurations, which I spoke about a few minutes ago. So part one is what is in the heart center. Then we go to the next page here of the table of contents, and we have part two, which is an elucidation of the appearance of the wrathful deities in the infinite state and the intermediate state of reality. So here are the different Buddha Harukas. So the Harukas are these fierce deities, which are emanations of the peaceful deities. When the peaceful deities aren't working because there's so much obstruction in the emotions, then these fierce deities are realized, are presented as a means to have more powerful energy to be able to cut through those obscurations. Their work is complete wisdom, complete compassion. And to say that they're wrathful, I've always had a problem with that because the wrathful to me has a connotation of anger to it or hatred. They're wrathful. They're trying to get even. You did something wrong, and they're gonna make you repent. Through their activity and everything. But they're fierce. Their compassion is fierce. So in that way, I think it's more accurate to use that term. But throughout the books and so on, it's always referred to as the wrathful deity. So we maintain that. But I just want to make it clear how in which these deities work and so on. So we're going to see that as we, in the weeks to come, this part two, this elucidation. So this is in order to be able to cut through whatever those obscurations are, and so that we can remain in that absolute reality and not allow ourselves to slip back into the ordinary reality of suffering, of ignorance, of hatred, and so on like that. So we want to remain in that peaceful state of mind, that samadhi that we talk about, and so on, to remain there. So part three, this next part, is the elucidation of the intermediate state, the elucidation of the intermediate state of rebirth. For those of us or human beings who were not successful in being able to remove those afflictions, those obscurations, and still have the habitual tendencies and so on like that. And the karma, we talked about the alaya consciousness and still have that karma that is forcing them, that is moving them in the direction away from this absolute reality to the phenomenal reality, to be born again, to be born as an ordinary human being or in some form, some physical form, how in which that works, how in which that operates. So this is what part three is all about. How to choose a womb entrance, how to say we want to be born as a human being. We don't want to be born through an egg birth as a reptile or as a bird or something like that. We don't want to be born as a hungry ghost. We don't want to be born in the hell realms. We don't want to be born as a insect. So we go through what all these modes of birth are so that we can familiarize ourselves and see that figuratively they coincide with the changes that we go through in our meditation and post-meditation. That these things, these phenomenal things are happening to us, are in front of us all the time. And we have to learn how to choose to be able to cut through them, not necessarily to block them. At some point, we just cut them off, but there may be points where we do suppress them, but then they're only going to come up at another time. So it's ultimately that what we're trying to do is to cut through these things. So we have to cut through these things by being educated, by learning what they are, why they are, and how it is that we do cut through them. So this part three helps us to be able to understand that, to recognize that. So we'll definitely go through this part when, in the latter parts of our 12 sessions here. We'll go through these in sequence. Then, here in the table of contents are the concluding daily prayers. That whatever practices we're doing, whatever study we have in part one, part two, or part three, there are these concluding prayers that help us to dedicate for the enlightenment of all beings, for the liberation of all beings, and to stabilize our merit, our understanding of what it is that we've done through the study and practices and so on. So, all these prayers, everything that I've just mentioned, is all in this text. And I had 4 copies that I sent to Bernie and to Kunga and to Brendan, who's not here today, but he's going to be watching on YouTube, but he's traveling for work. And the other copy went to Larry Tepper. So I hope it's appreciated. And if you don't want the copy, send it back to me, and I'll see to it that it goes to somebody who can use it. These 4 daily prayers are also on our website, and they're in a book form, a booklet that can be downloaded, and you can print it. I'll be very happy to. I have some printed copies, and I'll be very happy to send you a printed copy of this if you just let me know that you want that. So this, I think, is very important that you should have this for this study. The book itself, the Bardo Thodol itself, would be very good to have. But if you want it, I'd have to print it for you. And I want to know that, it's something that you really want to have. So if you let me know that, I'll be more than glad to make it available to you. Otherwise, we're going to go through it, and we'll go through the pages online here like this, and you'll, maybe you want, a copy of this book. This book you can order through Amazon and other places and so on. So you may want to do that. This is a hardback. You can get it as a paperback and so on. This Bardo Thodol, this book here, is the root text that was extracted from the book by Gourmet Dorje. So in the book here is the root text, but it's surrounded by commentary. So I extracted just the root text in English, and that's what I printed for everybody. But if you want the commentary from Gourmet Dorje, of course, that's a great thing to do. You should do it. There's many other things in that book that we refer to, but if you want your own copy of it, it's great. Any comments or questions about anything that I've talked about thus far? Okay. Well, then we'll begin by reciting the opening prayers. So
Oh,
now,
Dorje, I just wanted to say that it's a really beautiful copy of the book you made here.
yes,
I was just
thank you.
looking through it a little bit while you were talking.
Yes,
I really like the illustrations you included. Thank you.
thank you. And there, that's another feature of this to help us to understand. Yes, thank you. We'll be talking more. I'm going to send more pictures for that. Okay, so the first of the daily prayers, the opening prayers, are the root verses of the intermediate states. So I'm going to ask Kunga, because he has a copy of the book, to read this one. And I'm going to ask Bernie if he would read the second one. So the first one is on page 1. And the second one is on, I believe, page 7. So I'm going to ask Bernie if he would recite that and maybe help me save my voice a little bit. So, okay. Matt, how you doing? Is this okay?
Yes. Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. So, Kunga, if you'll read and you'll start with the title and this and these couple paragraphs to introduce the what we're reading.
Okay. Root verses of the 6 intermediate states. According to the cycle of teachings, the circle of birth and death can be seen as being composed of 6 intermediate states. These 6 modalities of existence are waking living state, dreaming, meditation, the time of death, and the 2 successive phases of the after-death state are defined in the glossary. This poem emphasizes the centrally important perspective that relates to each of these states. It is recommended that practitioners should memorize these verses and recite them repeatedly while reflecting on their meaning throughout their lives. I bow down to the conquerors, the peaceful and grateful deities. Alas, now as the intermediate state of living arises before me, renouncing laziness, for which there is no time in this life, I must enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation, taking perceptual experience and the nature of mind as the path. I must cultivate actualization of the 3 Buddha bodies. Now, having obtained the precious human body this one time, I do not have the luxury of remaining on a distracted path. Alas, now as the intermediate state of dreams arises before me, renouncing the corpse-like incentive sleep of delusion, I must enter free from distracting memories, the state of the abiding nature of reality. Cultivating the experience of inner radiance through the recognition, emanation, and transformation of dreams, I must not sleep like a beast, but cherish the experiential cultivation which mingles sleep with actual realization. Alas, now as the intermediate state of meditative concentration arises before me, renouncing the mass of distractions and confusions, I must undistractedly enter a state which is devoid of subjective apprehension and free from the 2 extremes, and attain stability in the state of generation and perfection. At this moment, having renounced activity, having attained a singular concentration, I must not fall under the sway of bewildering mental afflictions. Alas, now as the intermediate state of the time of death arises before me, renouncing all attachments, yearning, and subjective apprehensions in every respect, I must undistractedly enter the path on which the oral teachings are clearly understood, and eject my own awareness into the uncreated expanse of space. Immediately upon separation from this compounded body of flesh and blood, I must know this body to be like a transient illusion. Alas, now as the intermediate state of reality arises before me, renouncing the merest sense of awe, terror, or fear, I must recognize all that arises to be awareness manifesting naturally of itself. Know such sounds, lights, and rays to be visionary phenomena of this intermediate state. At this moment, having reached this critical point, I must not fear the assembly of peaceful and grateful deities which manifest naturally. Alas, now as the intermediate state of rebirth arises before me, I must with one pointed intention concentrate my mind and resolutely connect with the residual potency of my virtuous past actions. I must obstruct the womb entrance and call to mind the method of reversal. This is the time when perseverance and purity of perception are imperative. I must give up all jealousy and meditate on my spiritual teacher, the consort. From the mouth of the accomplished masters come these words. Oh, you with your mind far away, thinking death will not come, entranced by the pointless activities of this life. If you were to return empty-handed now, would not your life's purpose have been utterly confused? Recognize what it is that you truly need. It is a sacred teaching for liberation. So should you not practice this divine, sacred teaching beginning from this very moment? And it is also said, if I choose not to take the oral teachings of the spiritual teacher to heart, am I not the deceiver of myself?
Thank you, Barney. Would you mind reciting the next prayers? Barney, you're muted. If you're saying something, Barney, we can't hear you. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. Still can't hear you. No, can't hear you. Well, there must be something with your microphone. As you speak, are you able to see the little microphone? Are you getting an indication on the microphone showing that you're getting a signal coming through? Maybe it's internal to your computer. Who's that? Is that Matt? Yes.
I was just saying, if you'd like, I could read the text while Bernie's figuring his microphone out. Just let me know.
All right. You're going to read it from the screen?
Yeah, I have a copy
Okay.
from what was sent in the email. I need you to tell me the page because I was just listening to Kunga. I got lost in terms of what page he was on. But
We're on page 4, the natural liberation of habitual tendencies.
okay.
Bernie went offline, and let's give him a chance to come back on.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So thank you, people who are watching this on YouTube. Sorry for this delay here, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure everybody remains with us.
I'll say in the meantime that that prayer, the prayer so far is a really great like expression of renunciation and yeah, it reminded me of the thoughts that turned the mind to the Dharma and in a way that was really wonderful about not wasting this life.
Very good. Yes. All right, Bernie, try it again.
Okay, do you hear
There,
me
we
now?
got you. Yes.
I had to turn it, I had to drop out and drop back in to get it. Okay. Natural liberation of habitual tendencies. The 10 branch prayer for the accumulation of merit. Visualize in the space before you the three precious jewels and the deities of the 100 enlightened families and recite as follows. Om Ah Hum. I
Please
res-
use the title.
okay, the branch of taking refuge. Om Ah Hum. I respectfully take refuge inseparably from now until enlightenment in the infinitude of peaceful and wrathful deities, the conquerors going to bliss, the three precious jewels, the meditational deities, the oceans of dakinis, and the assembly of oath-bound practitioners,
Protectors.
within the infinite Buddha fields reaching to the limits of space. The branch of invitation, I request the infinite peaceful and wrathful deities of the 10 directions and 4 times, compassionate emanations embodying discriminative awareness and skillful means, pervading the vast infinite space of reality's expanse, to come to this place for the sake of all living beings. The branch of requesting the deities to be seated. I request that the meditational deities be seated here on sun, moon, and lotus cushions, symbolizing skillful means, discriminative awareness, and their stainless union. Upon their bejeweled thrones, fashioned in the form of lions and so forth, in an attitude of unblemished supreme delight. Within this mandala of pristine cognition, which is the natural purity of phenomenal existence. The branch of paying homage. I bow down to the assembly of peaceful and wrathful conquerors, to the father and mother deities, and all their offspring, whose essence is the pristine cognition of Samantabhadra, displayed as uncorrupted bliss in the secret womb of Samantabhadri, the branch of making offerings. I request the peaceful and wrathful conquerors, the oceans of those going to bliss, to partake of these inestimable outer, inner, and secret offerings, both those actually arrayed and those mentally emanated, which are offered for the benefit of all living beings. The branch of confession of negativities. I acknowledge and remorsefully confess all my negative obscurations and all my habitual tendencies of body, speech, and mind, beginninglessly influenced by the 3 poisons which are the accumulating causes for rebirth, among the lower states of suffering in cyclic existence. The branch of sympathetic rejoicing. I rejoice with great delight in the Buddha fields of supreme bliss, where all phenomenal existence is recognized as the pervasion of reality's expanse. I rejoice in all compassionate acts, in their merits, and in their altruistic attention, and in all deeds that are the source of merit and pristine cognition. The branch of turning the wheel of sacred teachings. I exhort the teachers throughout the fields of the 10 directions, who are numerous as atoms, to stir from their meditative commitments for the sakes of all sentient beings, and to turn the wheel of the sacred teachings, thus entirely pervading the reaches of space. The branch of requesting the Buddhists not to enter nirvana. I beseech you, O teachers, infinite Buddhas without exception, to remain present and not to pass into paranirvana, and to continue to enact the deeds of extensive benefit for the sake of beings, until the world systems of cyclic existence have been emptied. The branch of dedication of merit to the unsurpassed creator, greater vehicle. By the power of whatever past, present, and future virtues I accumulate, may all sentient beings throughout the furthest reaches of space mature into worthy recipients of the unsurpassed greater vehicle, and then swiftly attain the status of infinite, peaceful, and wrathful deities. As the 10-branch prayer is concluded, the Lama visualizes that all the objects of refuge melt into light and then gradually dissolve into the crowns of each of the attendant persons, including the dying person and himself.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So going back, let's go back to the beginning part, the 6 root the root verses of the 6 intermediate states. So as Matt said, this is something that we, one time or another, have been introduced to, that we've talked about. But, Here we have the intermediate state of living, the intermediate state of dreams, the intermediate state of um, uh, concentrated meditation, the intermediate state of reality, the intermediate state of death, excuse me, the intermediate state of death, then the intermediate state of reality, and then the intermediate state of rebirth. So these are the six bardos. Within the bardo of living, this bardo that we're in now, that we're present in, we're conversing in, we have the bardo of dreams and the bardo of meditative concentration. So the meditative, so the dream aspect is an involuntary process in the beginning. We go to sleep, our senses are rested, our mental activity continues, our brain activity continues. And the first part of our sleep deals with daily emotions and things that are going on. And sometimes we wake up, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning with some kind of a disturbing sleep, because of something that was going on. Maybe it was some kind of an elation that we were so happy about, or maybe it was something that we were sad about, something that was that we were worried about, and so on. And we wake up, and we may have difficulty getting back to sleep or not. That's the first part of the dreams. The second part of the dreams comes later if we get back to sleep, then around 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Then we go through, that period of what might be called the REM, the rapid eye movement. And this is a much deeper dream state where we are actually recognizing, we're crossing over, we're having a dialogue, if you will, with the absolute, with the bardo of reality. And it's very symbolic, and sometimes we can understand it, sometimes not. Sometimes it can be very soothing to us, sometimes it can be very upsetting to us, and so on. But the point here is that the intermediate state of dreams is involuntary in the beginning. The next part is the intermediate state of meditation, where we're learning how to control the mind. We're going through the stages of meditation, the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. We're thinking about bodhicitta. We're thinking about shamatha meditation. We're thinking about vipassana meditation, the things that we've spent a fair amount of time in talking about over the years and so on. And to be able to get to that point of meditative concentration where we're having that point of being able to experience no thought, to be able to get away from the display of those thoughts and how they come up into our consciousness and so on. And to have that window of being able to have that clarity and so on. So that takes effort, it takes control, and so on. Once we get a handle on that, once we're able to do that, it's not going to be perfectly stable, especially in the beginning. But once we get some stability with that, then we can feed that back to our dreams, and that we can have more control with our dreams and be able to particularly in that latter part of our dream sequence in the early morning and in the 4 or 5 o'clock time, that we can control the dreams, that we become an active participant in the dreams, that it becomes less voluntary, that it becomes controlled. The dream or the meditative concentration is completely voluntary. We're completely controlling it. So that's what we're working towards. So both of these are in the bardo of living, and we're in living. So every day, everything that we see, all this phenomenal nature, do we see it as samsara, suffering, an ocean of suffering, or can we transmit that? Can we change that, transform that into the bardo of, or into the to a Buddha field? into a wholly enlightened awareness of what is going on with that absolute nature that permeates everything that we are part of. So, Kunga, you had your hand up.
Yes. So in a lot of the scriptures, it talks about how reality is like a dream, how reality is ephemeral, changing, an illusion. And so I was wondering, do we have to see the state of dreams as related only to sleep, or can we also see that state of dreams as our lived experience when we're awake? It seems like there's often the sutras talk about that. So I just wondering that connection between that, if there's any. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I think that's a great observation. And yes, I think daydreams, and just and inconsequential things or what's seeming to be inconsequential things, become like dreams and so on like that, as you point out. So yes, that's a very healthy thing to be able to recognize that our phenomenal nature is illusory, is like a um, is like a dream. And that's how we come to recognize, that's how we come to control our mind, because our mind is the field in which all this takes place. And to be able to say that our mind is not infinite. Our mind is very, it's within this phenomenal nature, and all this is taking place in that mind, and that we should treat it like an illusory display of samsara, of the confusion, of the phenomenal nature, and so on. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, that makes sense to me. I because I think of that, we talk about that a lot in different texts, that this life is like a dream, not just when you're sleeping, but just when you're awake as well. Because what we see out there, we take as reality, as like a fixed reality, but things are really constantly changing. And we're sort of simplifying things all the time. And we're dealing with our concepts of what we think is out there, not really dealing with what's really out there, because what's really out there is a lot more complex than what maybe we feel like we need to understand at the moment. It's just easier to kind of say, this is my spouse I've been married to for 30 years. She's the same spouse that I married 30 years ago, the same person. It's easy to say that and assume those things, even though we know they're, deep down, they're not true, right? That's a completely different person. I'm a completely different person, not just from 30 years ago, but just from the moment ago. Things are constantly changing. So I just thought that was, for me, that's a useful way to understand that. And then that seems to make sense to move like when the first stage is like, before you're introduced to the teachings. The second stage is you've been introduced to the teachings, you see that this reality is not real. Then this next stage, this meditative stage, is like a building on that. Now we know it's not real. We want to do something about it. How do we train our mind to interact in a way that's more helpful, skillful, I guess I would say. Thank you.
Uh, if I could say something about the idea that life is just like a dream, the way
Sure.
I think about it is that most of the time we spend either thinking about the past or the future, and the past and the future only exist in our imagination. The only thing that exists that is real is the current moment. So, in that sense, we're living in a dream because we're living in our thoughts, we're living in our imagination, and not in the present moment.
Yes.
The dream metaphor is also often used in the other tradition that I have some experience with, at least with like Advaita Vedanta, which is very similar to Buddhist tradition, um, where they use it to as like a pointer for the nature of consciousness, how there could be what feels like in the dream, if as long as you're not lucid dreaming, that there's a character there that feels like a self with its own perspective that feels cut off from the perspectives of the other characters in a dream, but it's all happening. When you wake up, you see it was all happening within one consciousness, that's more fundamental than the characters in the dream or the phenomenon in the dream, but is like the dream is suffused of it or made up of it, not perfect language, but something like that. So yeah, I find it a really powerful metaphor as well.
There's a particular prayer that I found from Padmasambhava in one of the texts, and it's a prayer specific to the sleep. It's a sleep prayer. And if I can, I'd like to recite it because it really focuses on this illusory nature of things, not just sleep. It says, in order to free myself and others from the ocean of samsara, I would like to engage in the practice of dream yoga, which has the power to liberate the suffering, fear, and confusion of samsara. May all beings achieve perfect happiness and complete awakening. Grant me the blessings to recognize dream as dream, illusion as illusion, confusion as confusion, and see the reality of all as the absolute nature of mind. I not only want to recognize my dreams, I want to travel in my dreams to the Buddha fields to hear the teachings of different Buddhas. So it's equating the dreams, the illusions, and the confusions as all just mental projections, just the nature of the mind. And do we abide in the mind as being real, as being permanent, or do we recognize that the mind is just this transitory tool that we have in our phenomenal nature, and that if we begin to recognize our heart thoughts rather than our brain thoughts, where the mind is, that our heart mind, if we can use that, heart mind, our brain, our heart thoughts, is where the absolute resides, is where we want to be, is where the Buddha nature, where the awakened one is.
And I would like to add another thing about this idea about dreams. I know Bernie's very scientific, so maybe he would build on this if he knows anything about it. But I read somewhere that this is a sort of scientific hypothesis about what's going on with sleep and why we have dreams. That it's the nature of neurons in our mind to fire. They just keep firing, even though we're sleeping, and they're just firing as a response to stimuli. And that our brain, when we're sleeping, is struggling with these random patterns to make sense of them. And so it uses what it knows already and puts those templates on the patterns so that's how you end up with dreams that kind of correspond with things from your memories and stuff, because your brain's like, this just from scientific point of perspective, your brain's just trying to make these random images, symbols into meaning. And so it uses symbol patterns it already knows and just applies them. And where they match up, it kind of puts them together. And in relationship to our Buddhist studies, if we're training our minds to recognize certain Buddhist configurations of teachings, then as our mind starts to try to come up with meanings during our dreams, if that's the symbols and templates we've put in there, then those are the symbols and templates our mind is going to read into those symbols, versus someone who's maybe immersed their mind in popular culture, they are seeing images from popular culture in their dreams. We've immersed our mind in Buddhist studies, so when our mind goes to understand these random firings, it makes them into Buddhist stories for us. Thank you.
So can you let that go?
Mm. I for me, most of the time in my dreams, I don't know I'm dreaming, so I don't let them go. But I've had a dream in the last couple months that I was in a meditation, which I thought was really interesting and never happened. Like all of a sudden, I was like, I knew I was dreaming, but I also was in a meditative state, and I was able to deepen my meditation in my dream, which was really weird. And it was like just a dream that just kept on building like really positive states. And then eventually it was just like a rapture state. And then it kind of ended. My leg got uncomfortable or something. And I woke up. But, so for the most part, no, I can't let go of things in my dreams. I don't usually remember I'm dreaming.
Do you think that becomes an impediment?
What part?
Not being able to let them go, not to be
Hmm.
able to, not to be able to just let the process go, as
Hmm.
you just went through in detail, and you gave a scientific explanation of it. But do we hold on to that scientific explanation and the dream itself, or do we just let all of that go?
Yeah, like I said, in my dreams, I don't usually know I'm dreaming, so I don't usually have much agency to do anything. I'm just like getting pushed along whatever's happening for the most part. So I don't make a decision one way or the other. I'm just like they're experiencing everything as if it's really happening. And then I wake up and I'm like, oh, I was just dreaming, you know.
Okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments? We're uh, 20 minutes to the hour, and I said we would, at this point, have a conversation about whatever, we've been thinking about as we've been reciting and thinking about these prayers and ideas. Well, let me ask this question. What what do you want to get out of the Bardo Thodol discussion? What do you think it is, and what do you think you want to get out of it? Bernie, what about you?
I'd like to just, oh,
You're on,
okay,
you're on. We hear you.
I'm on. Okay, what I'd like to get out of is a better understanding of all the different deities that are involved, the peaceful and wrathful deities, and learn their significance. That's really what I'm looking for mostly out of this course.
Okay. Yep. Good. Matt, what do you think?
What I would most like to get from it is more pointers towards and flavor for the nature of mind itself.
Okay. And Kunga, what about you?
Well, I've heard of the text. I've heard of I've read Sogen Rinpoche's version of it, Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, several times. So I'm just open to whatever's in there. I don't have any preconceptions about what should be in there or anything. Just kind of just learning more about it, deeper understanding of it. But it's a new text to me, so it's any understanding is going to be a deeper understanding.
Okay, great. All right, very good. Thank you. I think, each of your comments will be answered, when we hopefully when we finish this, it's 12 weeks, you'll have a much better idea of what, the Bardo Todal is, how it operates and so on. Not that, we're going to be practitioners of it at this point, but at least to have a greater familiarity with it, and whether or not you decide to dig deeper into it and take it up as a practice, as a regular practice, to do more investigation about it, more study about it, and so on.
Pema, I'm familiar with the seven branch. Um,
Seven
let's see,
branch prayer.
yeah, seven branch
This is
prayer,
the 10 branch prayer, which have three additional prayers to the seven.
right? And
So,
the way I'm familiar with it, though, is a much more personal type of experience. So the first part, the invitation is to invite any type of, so you can tell me if this is similar to an understanding of some branch that you have or different. You invite a spiritual figure that's inspiration to you. Maybe it's your guru, or maybe it's someone like um, Shakyamuni Buddha to come and sit with you. You pay homage to them. Maybe I, visualize myself doing prostrations, but also they can talk about, paying homage to some quality that they have that you think is really important. And then the third branch is to offerings to the person, visualize off making offerings. The fourth branch is the confession, your own personal confession, something you've done recently that you feel is inappropriate. The fifth is to rejoice in the practices. You rejoice in what you're doing positive, kind of counteracting the confession of the negative. The sixth is asking the teacher you've invited to sit with for some specific understanding related to your own path, like something you're trying to understand and get a better understanding of. And then the seventh, is just asking the teacher to continue to stay with you and support you in your practice.
Yeah, well, the last one is actually a dedication, is taking the branch of dedication, the branch of realization for the benefit of others. Here, how's he express it in here? The dedication of merit on page 13 in the book that you have right now says, by the power of whatever past, present, and futures I accumulate, may all sentient beings throughout the furthest reaches of space mature into worthy recipients of the unsurpassed greater vehicle, and then swiftly attain the status of the infinite, peaceful, and wrathful deity. So that's the last one. That's the seventh one, is the dedication for the benefit of other beings. So the three additional ones are the invitation for the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, for the Shicho deities, for these hundred deities that are expressed in the Bardo Thodol to come together. You're calling them to come together. For what it means is for you to allow them to come up within yourself. They are all in you. All these deities are within ourselves. It's like that a diamond, that we talked about many times, has all these facets. This indestructible nature is our heart. This is a diamond nature with all these aspects and so on. May I come to recognize them. May they come up. May my consciousness begin to recognize them and to be able to have a dialogue, if you will, with them and be able to see how they benefit. So those are the three additional branches here: the branch of invitation, the branch of requesting the deities to be seated, and then the branch of paying homage to those deities and so on. So it's very powerful. It's very important. This is the process of recognizing that all this comes from within ourselves. It's not out there. It's all within here.
There's nothing out there. It's all in here, isn't it?
Yep. Figuratively, yes. So um, so doing the offerings, and offering to these deities within ourselves, we're saying to ourselves, may my higher self, may I come to recognize that higher aspects of who I am, my true nature, and there's a deity pride to it that is not an egocentric deity pride. It is more of a you know in the beginning it's a universal kind of a aspect to it, but even that at some point cuts away, and it becomes something of, we could say, higher vibrations, higher dimensions or something, because it's inexpressible, it's holy, it's sacred. So reciting this every day along with these other prayers, really helps us to hone in, hone our edge, to be able to cut through all the stuff that we attach to and all the stuff that we get confused by and so on, that we become deluded with and so on. So all this is a means to the liberation of all this process that's happening up here. Okay. Um, I would like to close then with reciting these closing prayers. So I'm going to ask Matt if you'll recite the first one, the closing prayers. Now these in the Bardo Thodol book, these are, let me see here, just one moment, is they start on page 207. So in this book that Matt has and what other people might have, that's what I'm going through right now. Wait a minute, I think I was yes. So this first one is called the aspirational prayer, which rescues from the dangerous pathways of the intermediate states. So what this means is that in between these states, the bardo of living, the bardo of dreams, the bardo of meditative concentration, the bardo of death, the bardo of reality, the bardo of rebirth, these pathways in there are very dangerous. We can get lost. We can lose whatever merit that we have gained through all our practices and so on. We can lose them, from our own confusion and so on, from the five poisons and the combinations of those and so on. So we're asking here, we're praying, we're remembering that these deities are here to be able to support us. So, Matt, if you would recite this out loud while everybody follows along, either on the book or here on the screen, it will be great.
Aspirational prayer which rescues from the dangerous pathways of the intermediate states. I bow down to the spiritual teachers, meditational deities, and dakinis. May I be guided on the path of their great love. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated bewilderment, may the spiritual teachers, holders of the oral lineages, draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant, clear light, which is undistracted study, reflection, and meditation. May the supreme consorts, the host of dakinis, support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate states, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated delusion, may the transcendent Lord Vairochana draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant blue light, which is the pristine cognition of reality's expanse. May the supreme consort Aksasa Datvishvari support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in the cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated aversion, may the transcendent Lord Vajrasattva Akashobhya draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant white light, which is the mirror-like pristine cognition. May the supreme consort, Buddha Lokana, support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated pride, may the transcendent Lord Ratnasambhava draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant yellow light, which is the pristine cognition of sameness. May the supreme consort Mamaki support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated attachment, may the transcendent Lord Amitabha draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant red light, which is the pristine cognition of discernment. May the supreme consort Pindaravasini support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated envy, may the transcendent Lord Amoga City draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant green light, which is the pristine cognition of accomplishment. May the supreme consort, Samaya Tara, support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by the 5 virulent poisons, may the transcendent conquerors, the male Buddhas, and the 5 enlightened families draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is the 4 pristine cognitions combined. May the 5 supreme female Buddhas, the purity of expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the light pass of the 6 impure classes of beings, and be escorted to the 5 utterly supreme and pure Buddha fields. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated habitual tendencies, may the assembly of spiritual heroes and awareness holders draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant multicolored light, which is co-emergent pristine cognition. May the supreme consorts, the host of Dakinis, support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated bewildering perceptions, may the assembly of blood-drinking, wrathful deities draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is free of fear and terrifying perceptions. May the assembly of the Kradesvari, queens of the expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Om Ah Hum. May the fields of the 5 elements not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the fields of the 5 Buddhas. May the elements of space not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the blue Buddha. May the element of water not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the white Buddha. May the elements of earth not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the yellow Buddha. May the elements of fire not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the red Buddha. May the elements of wind not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the green Buddha. May the awesome sounds, lights, and rays not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the infinite fields of the peaceful and wrathful deities. May the rainbow-colored elements not rise up as a hostile force. May I see them as the fields of the manifold Buddhas. May I recognize all sounds as my own sounds. May I recognize all lights as my own lights. May I recognize all rays as my own rays. May I spontaneously recognize the characteristics of the intermediate states. May the fields of the 3 Buddha bodies be manifest. Samaya.
Thank you. Now I'll recite this last one, the aspirational prayer, which protects from the fear of the intermediate states. When my life's course is ended and I roam alone in the intermediate states, the loved ones of this world can no longer help me. So at this critical time, may the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities, quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the deep darkness of my ignorance be dispelled. When I roam alone, separated from my loved ones, and myriad images of emptiness arise, naturally manifesting. May the Buddhas quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the fear of the awesome and terrifying intermediate state be annulled. When the 5 radiant lights of pristine cognition dawn, may I recognize them as my own nature, and without awe and without terror, and as the manifold forms of peaceful and wrathful deities arise, may I be fearlessly confident and recognize the characteristics of the intermediate states. When I experience suffering as the result of negative past actions, may the great compassionate one dispel all such misery. And as the natural sound of reality reverberates like 1,000 peals of thunder, may all sounds be heard as the teachings of the greater vehicle. When I am driven on by past actions, unable to find a refuge, may the meditational deities dispel all such misery. And as I experience the suffering of habitual tendencies and past actions, may the meditative stabilities of inner radiance and bliss naturally arise. When I am miraculously born into the intermediate state of rebirth, may I not be beguiled by the perverse prophecies of Mara. And as I freely arrive at every place that I think of, may the bewildering fear and terror generated by my negative past actions not arise. When the roars of savage wild beasts echo around me, may their cries be transformed into the sound of the sacred teachings, the 6 syllables, Om, Mani, Padme, Hum. And as I am engulfed by snow, rain, wind, and darkness, may I achieve the pure clairvoyance of radiant, pristine cognition. May sentient beings in the intermediate state, similar in kind to myself, be born into the higher realms, free from rivalry, and as severe dissonant mental states generate insatiable hunger and thirst, may the afflictions of hunger, thirst, heat, and cold be annulled. When I see my future parents in union, may I perceive them as Mahakarunika and consort, and for the sake of others, being blessed with the power to choose a birthplace, may I achieve an exalted body adorned with the auspicious major and minor marks. Once I have achieved birth in a supreme human form, may I act so as to swiftly liberate all who see and hear me. And may I not be influenced by my negative past actions, but multiply and emulate my past merits. Wherever I may be born, in whatever land it may be, may I quickly encounter the meditational deity of my past lives. Knowing from immediately after birth how to speak and walk, may I remember my past lives and attain the power of non-forgetfulness. May I easily come to master by study and reflection the manifold stages of learning, small, intermediate, and great. May the country into which I am born be auspicious, and may all sentient beings be blessed with happiness. O peaceful and wrathful conquerors, may I and all others become entirely at one with you, and come to resemble you in all your forms, your retinues, your lifespan, and your Buddha fields, and in every quality of your supreme auspicious marks. Through the compassion of Samantabhadra and the infinite peaceful and wrathful deities, by the power of the truth of pure reality, and by the blessing of the mansions who practice one-pointedly, may every wish of this aspirational prayer be fulfilled. Samaya. This was composed by the preceptor from Udayana, Padmakara. May this profound sacred teaching not be extinguished until all the worlds of cyclic existence have been emptied. This is a treasured text of Tulku Karma Lingpa. This is the liberation by wearing or seeing. Whoop, sorry. This is or would be like an amulet. And if you can see on each of these little features here are all the 100 deities that are all listed. Their names are listed here and so on. And we'll go on in the weeks to come to look at the peaceful mandala and the wrathful mandala and begin to see the interconnections of all these deities. In the center is Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri in the center here, which represents the primordial awakened one, the primordial Buddha. So thank you very much. If anybody has any last comments or questions you'd like to make, I'm here and we can have a discussion. If you need to go, we'll see you next week. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Lance. See you, everybody.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.